to help us meet our goal. Our next session is the U.S. maker response to COVID-19 with Johnny Xmas. Remember that story about the TSA key leaks? Johnny's with Grim Security Engineering. We're happy to have you here with us, and thank you for presenting at Hope 2020. Take it away, Johnny.
Hey kids, thanks for coming to my talk today. I'm Johnny Christmas, and we're going to be talking a little bit about the U.S. maker response to the COVID-19 pandemic, specifically addressing things that the general populace of the U.S. has had to do to deal with the shortcomings of the government that was supposed to protect it. I'm your host, Johnny Christmas. I'm a senior researcher, trainer, and AppSec engineer for Grim. You can find us at grim-co.com or grim.rip, which is my preferred URL for us. You may recognize me from my previous Hope talks. So this is my 5th or 6th time presenting here, both in panels and solo. I'm usually here doing either a panel on whatever we've done with the TSA keys this year, which now is nothing because we've reverse engineered all of them and there's nothing more to say about all of that. Or I'm on the Radio Statler panel every year. Be sure to check us out at radio.hope.net. We're going live all week long during Hope, or well, have been by the time you see this video. But we're not going to be talking about messing with the government too much or breaking into corporations or things like that I normally talk about here. Today we're going to be talking about makers and making and 3D printing and things like that, which is something that a lot of the hacker cons and the security cons don't really focus on, but something that Hope has really been into, and it's kind of been at the core of what Hope is. This is my 20th year speaking at Hope. I am a very, very dedicated Hope attendee, obviously. I was hoping to be able to physically attend for 20 straight years since H2K, but obviously this is the best that we're going to be able to get, so you're all going to have to just kind of give me credit for this one. Let's talk about what's going on here. I'm going to cover some things that are painfully obvious for all of the US viewers here, but because Hope has such a massive international viewership due to, all of the really cool European sister cons we have and the people who listen to us from allegedly every single continent. I haven't gotten confirmation on Antarctica, but I've been told it's happening. I'm going to cover this for all of you. The US, as may be international news, did not have a proper plan in place for a pandemic at the time the pandemic arrived. We did have one shortly before. What happened was the new administration came in around 2016, and you all know who heads up that administration, and thought it would be wise to take the pandemic team that we had assembled and that had been trained and had put a playbook together and split them up and put them on all sorts of other teams within the administration. Allegedly, the hope was that if a pandemic did happen, you would have one person in each of these teams who really knew what was going on, and they would be able to immediately get everyone up to speed, and we'd hit the ground running anytime a pandemic came. And that absolutely was not at all the case, as you could tell by simply looking at any kind of infection chart related to the US whatsoever. We were not prepared. We knew it was coming, and our administration, in an effort to maintain our economy, decided to not do anything about it, including not tell the people about it. If you watched and listened to or read international news, you definitely knew the pandemic was happening and was going to hit us because there was no way it couldn't. Most Americans, being xenophobic as they are, don't read international news and were unawares. They listen to what the president has to say, and one would think that the president will definitely take care of us because it's his one job. The president opted to keep the economy rolling instead of telling everybody to stay home and bring it to a screeching halt. That, of course, was blatantly, obviously now, the worst possible decision that could have been made here. And not only because nobody took any precautions to avoid the pandemic, manufacturers of personal protective equipment, or PPE, weren't able to prepare enough to be able to produce what was needed when the pandemic hit. And to date, that's still getting to be a problem. And it wasn't just that, like, hey, it's going to take us a while to produce that much of whatever, to make that many N95 masks. They didn't have the materials ready to do this. Generally, the way mass production of most things works is you buy your materials ahead of time, and you try to guess how much you're going to need for the next season for things that roll in seasons. Like most medical PPE kind of goes in like a seasonal thing, especially if you're dealing with illnesses, because you'll have, we have cold season, we have flu season, we have, summers are when the most injuries happen, etc. You can kind of predict when these things are going to happen and what kind of PPE is going to be needed, and when. What happened here was the US overall needed 10 times the amount of PPE that it normally does. And there was no way that any manufacturer here, or really abroad, had that much. Had that much materials ready to go, let alone the time it takes to produce anything. And so we were screwed. We were stuck with whatever we had available at the hospitals, in our homes, what have you. That was it. Many of us hobbyists, and some professional shops and some hacker spaces and things like that said, hey, we have devices here that we make things with. They're rapid prototyping devices. They're not meant for creating durable goods, but we can make things. Can we at least start? I'm one person with one printer, but there's a million of us. If a million of us could print one thing a minute, would that be helpful? And if so, what are those things? And so it came to pass that they said, well, yeah, there's certain durable goods that we need. Obviously you can't print cloth masks and things, but you can print other stuff. And they said, hey, here's some face shield parts and things like that, and we'll get into what those are in a second. So okay, let's print that. And shouldn't millions of us with all of these printers be able to just start cranking things out really fast and get the ball rolling and take care of the problem and cut it off at the pass, and we'd be all set? Isn't 3D printing like futuristic magic, where you hit a button and it just goes to the printer, and then you get your coffee and then you sit back and just wait a couple of minutes and now you have a thing? No, not at all. It's not like that. It's not push button. It's not send it to the printer and you're done. It's not like printing a sheet of paper, except that it's a lot like printing a sheet of paper. It's a lot like when you tell your computer to send something to the printer, and then you go look at what printed and you said, this isn't what I wanted. And then you try 6 or 7 times, and then you deal with whatever that 6th or 7th result was, because you have to go home. Except that seeing how bad the printer screwed it up when you're talking about 3D printers can take hours, and it can look like it's working fine. And then you walk away, and then you come back 6 hours later, and then you find out it made you spaghetti, and you didn't want spaghetti. You wanted a Millennium Falcon, and you just waited 6 hours, and now you have spaghetti. 3D printing sucks. It's great for rapid prototyping. It's great for what it is. It was meant to be a replacement for the expensive and time-consuming process of creating something in a 3D design program, sending it to a die casting place to have a one mold made, and then they cast it and they send you back what comes out of that mold 3 weeks later, and you go, well, I got to tweak this and this, and so you tweak it in your software, and then you send that out and you wait 3 weeks. With 3D printing, you only have to wait a few hours. Because of the way it works, it's not perfect. It's far from perfect. It's certainly not great for producing durable goods. It's meant to produce something that you look at and you go, yeah, that looks good. And then you send the final file over to the injection molding or CNC or what have you. it's not great because you're dealing with melting and solidifying plastics and polymers. They're affected by environmental factors like temperature and airflow while they're printing, because it prints layer by layer by layer. And, none of us live in an atmospherically static environment. Nobody even has, a shop or hackerspace that's atmospherically static. Air is constantly moving. In fact, as animals, we need the air to constantly move. And so you as the air moves, you can have a 1 to 2 degree temperature shift flowing through your printer or around your printer, even if the printer's sealed. And that can create differences in the viscosity of the plastic as it's printing. And then you get misshapen layers, or you get it hardening against the nozzle, and then your whole print is failed. But because it takes hours and hours and hours to print many things, you're not sitting there staring at it. You're not babysitting. It's not like when you send something to your paper printer and then you go, all right, here it comes out, takes a second, you look at it and you go, no, that didn't work, and you go try again. You walk away and you come back to find that your print is just destroyed. It's not meant for mass production. It's meant for producing one thing a few times. For those of you who remember, the TSA keys talks about 3D printing TSA keys, and that's how they got really popular. It said, look, anybody with a 3D printer can now have a copy of the TSA keys, and it turns out not really. 3D printing has very low tolerances. You can't print anything useful at that level of tolerance with a 3D printer, except it turned out the TSA locks also had really shitty low tolerances, and so it was kind of okay for some of them. But you definitely can't mass produce at the level of like PPE production plants for sure, and that is a big problem. And yet that's what we're doing. We're cranking this stuff out, and it's working. We've got this is actually from a for reals medical facility. These are for reals medical professionals who were extremely thankful to be receiving these 3D printed goods. And what we see in the picture here is, and we'll get into these again in just a little bit, the face shields that they're wearing here are made of a 3D printed head bracket. You can see the blue parts going across the top, and then generally hand cut PETG clear plastic, because actually it turned out to be way faster to hand cut it than it is to throw those into a laser cutter, as far as the consumer laser cutters go. The third from the left is actually wearing, what I hope is your left, is actually wearing a 3D printed respirator mask, and I'll talk about those in a second as well. There's quite a number of things we've been 3D printed. My friend Monkey 13 sent this image in the center here. We've got the face mask. The white thing in the center is the face shield headband. And that's gone through a number of iterations. It originally started as something that required an elastic band to be attached to the back so it would hold it against the head. It had more notches around it, things like that. And over time, with everyone working together, they actually started to figure out, like, hey, how can we make this use less materials? How can we make this print faster? How can we make this work just as well without having to go through all of these assembly steps? And so you can see someone added little temples on there, similar to how like sunglasses work and hold against your head, so that we wouldn't need the elastic band in the back anymore. So now we need less materials and we have less assembly time, and that helps us get these out faster. The red and gray and white things with the little notches on them are ear savers, and you can see up on the top right there how those work. We're working in a world where not only medical professionals have to wear masks for what used to be an 8-hour shift and is now a 12, 16, 18, 20-hour shift, but everyone who goes outside now has to wear a mask, regardless of mandate. Like, this is what's required in order to get the outbreaks to stop. Everyone has to wear a mask, and that's super uncomfortable. Everyone hates it. Nobody's excited to put their mask on, regardless of, whether you're, doing it because it's the right thing to do or not. Everyone hates it. I hate having to wear mine, and I wear it every single time I go outside because I want this crap to be over with. Somebody made these ear savers, that you clip. They kind of replace the backs of your ears, and you can 3D print these. These cost me about 4 cents a piece to make, and I can crank out 70 of these in a day, and they last a long time. They're durable enough, so I can help 70 people every single day with these ear savers. And one, my 3D printer is probably 6 or 7 years old, and I can make these, and they're super useful. They use no materials, dumb little thing, and they make everybody wear their masks all the time, which is great. We have these respirators in the top left here. They're made out of a flexible material that you can 3D print. It's almost rubbery. And the thinking is that it'll conform to your face and create a seal, and you put a respirator like an N95 pad in the front. The studies aren't great on these. It's difficult to get a medical, hermetic seal around your face on these, especially if you have facial hair. If you have facial hair, you're not getting a seal, and that's that. Don't bother. But it's not bad. So there was a lot of controversy when these started being printed, and the controversy really it's around the fact that people think that they're going to be protected, and they're not unprotected. It's just not a great solution. Like if you really need a respirator, which most people don't, but if you need an N95 respirator, your best bet is to buy one. But at the time, they were very hard to find. And over here, we've got what's clearly, it's a hands-free door opener, but it's small enough to be made into a keychain. So you just always have it, and then you just clink the door. You don't have to touch public door handles anymore. Again, 3D printed, cheap as hell. We can crank these out, super durable for what little they do. We've also got industrial facilities who we didn't expect to get involved making stuff for us. We ran out of hand sanitizer really quickly, and the producers of hand sanitizer were like, we're making as much as we can as fast as we can. We are out of materials, and we can only produce stuff so fast. Like the machines only go so fast, so you just have to wait. We're working around the clock. I don't know what else to do. But what's the ingredients in hand sanitizer? It's alcohol and a thickening agent, a gelling agent, and that's it. And so all of these distilleries who now were not selling anything because all of the bars had been shut down and nobody was buying anything, and even the liquor stores were barely open anymore, they said, well, what can we do? We can make alcohol. So they started making hand sanitizer. And so one of the ones that really hit the news here was the Jeppson's Malort hand sanitizer. For those of you who are unfamiliar, Malort is a very, very popular liqueur from Chicago that's distilled with wormwood, which if you've never had wormwood, it tastes like it sounds. I wouldn't say pleasant. It's extremely bitter. But they were one of the first to start making hand sanitizer, and they only sent it to medical facilities. They said, look, this isn't for public consumption. We're making this explicitly for the medical facilities where medical workers need it the most. And of course, this was early on in the pandemic when we had a problem with people hoarding this stuff. You may remember there was someone in the news where they had found a guy in, I think it was Kentucky, who had bought every last bottle of hand sanitizer in the county, filled his garage with it, and then was selling it on eBay for insane amounts of money. That was, of course, confiscated. And I don't know what happened after it was confiscated. And I have to just imagine that the police kept it and used it for themselves, because of course they would. But yeah, it was a problem. And so Malort said, no, this is not for public sale. This is going straight to medical facilities. Stop calling us. But really cool that all these distilleries were able to start contributing in this way, using equipment that they had, and in manners that it wasn't necessarily meant for, which is hacking in its purest form. And then also people who weren't so mechanically and technically inclined started making things, because 3D printers could only make plastic things. Distilleries could only distill things. What about all of the wide swath of medical clothing that's needed in these facilities? You need masks, you need bonnets, you need shoe covers, you need full body suits depending on the environment you might be in. And so people who had a capacity to sew or just thought this is a great time to learn took it upon themselves to start making non-disposable masks, because the disposable masks, again, were gone, hoarded, not being produced, not being procured. So what can we do? And this was great, especially because it started really picking up around the time when the studies had started showing that you don't necessarily need an N95 filtration mask to solve the problem. All you need to do is stop the droplets from coming off of your face when you breathe and talk. And you just need any kind of face covering. Even a t-shirt is fine. And so everyone said, well, we have tons of t-shirts lying around and tons of old clothes that we're never going to touch again. You can make 15 masks out of one t-shirt. And they got to work and they started making them. And it was really cool. People started buying up Tyvek and making full body suits out of this Tyvek and sharing their patterns and getting to work. And it's just been really cool because this is now very far outside of the realm of like the typical hackered electromechanical chemical engineer stuff. This is someone who's just, in the past would be someone who, oh, neat, they make their own clothes. Oh, neat, they can make a shirt. Now they've become absolutely critical to stopping the spread of the pandemic here, to stopping these outbreaks from happening. Potentially the most important people as far as this stopping these outbreaks has been these people making these masks. This is my friend Rachel here, with the two on the left at least, making some really pretty masks, as well as these masks here, which are critical for working in facilities where you're dealing with the hearing impaired who are used to speaking or used to lip reading. And so while this is terrifying to look at as a two-dimensional image, I assure you it's much less terrifying in person. This is a clear vinyl sheet sewn into the mask. It's not a hole cut out. That would obviously be exceptionally stupid to put any kind of hole in the front of a mask. Like, why bother? This is a vinyl covering, so you still are preventing the droplets from getting spread, while at the same time being able to not only read the lips, but emote, to be able to tell if someone is happy or angry or sad. So also great for people who can't speak, who need to use their facial expressions to tell you if something's wrong. These masks are for them, and Rachel is producing them as well as many other people. And once that really took off, we started working together. And the makers noticed that there was some areas of improvement that could be had, or the people who were doing the sewing. I don't know what the gender neutral term for someone who sews is. Is it tailor? Is it a clothist? I don't know. But the people who had more experience as well said, hey, normally like there's things like this, or sometimes we'll make jigs when we're making large amounts, or when we're producing large amounts of clothing or something like that. It'd be cool if we had a jig for this or that. Like there's pleat jigs out there, but they're not set up for the size of pleats that are normally in a pleated mask, and I can't find anything like that. And so then the 3D printers and the makers on that side of things went to work and said, well, we'll make some jigs. And so they started making, like you see here, we've got pleat jigs, and that's for putting pleats in the mask, which allows the mask to be pulled up under the chin and over the nose, which is critical. Any number of us, we've all gone outside and seen the people who like just put the mask over their chin and keep going like this, or let their nose hang out like dangly genitals. And that's like defeating the purpose. And it's because the masks don't fit right and they're uncomfortable. This is helping to make a more comfortable mask. It's just like the ear savers. Comfort makes people use things. When they're comfortable, they'll go along with it. When they're uncomfortable, they'll find every excuse possible to not do it. And what we have here is, these are called bias tape jigs. I wanted to get into what bias tape does or why you need a jig, but suffice it to say, it's critical in making reusable masks, and using these jigs saves a lot of time in the band making process. And so again, between that, we've been able to not only make masks more comfortable, which makes them used more often by more people, we've also been able to greatly decrease the amount of time it takes to produce a mask, and thus increase the number that we're able to produce in any given day or period of time, what have you. Unfortunately, with everyone saying, "Holy crap, we got to get to work right away. Let's go. Let's start making the stuff. I'm going to do it. You're going to do it. Let's all do it." We've ended up with this kind of Tower of Babel situation where every social media platform has 140,000 different groups, all dedicated to making and distributing various kinds of PPE. And because we're all people like us, we all want to be the most important, and we all want to be the center of attention, even in a time when nobody should be the center of attention, when we need to all be contributing equally and not drawing attention to ourselves whatsoever. I was actually kicked out of one of the largest Chicago Facebook PPE distribution groups because I kept mentioning another group I was also helping, and I was sharing information between the two, and the woman who ran the Facebook group banned me for this, banned me for information sharing. Fucking baffling. Every person stood up their own Slack. Every person who's making PPE stood up a Slack and expects us all to check 1,000 Slacks a day. I already have 1,000 Slacks. I don't need 1,000 more. I don't check one Slack a day. I don't need all of these. Please stop. Everybody stood up Google Forms. We're like, hey, do you need PPE? Let us know here. And then, of course, what happened is 1 trillion people need PPE. So you got 1 trillion forms. And then you've got 4 people on the other end trying to sort these out. No. I filled one out once, and I got a response 2 months later. Not to say that that's a norm or that's average, but it's kind of a thing. People are hoarding materials because they said, "Oh God, materials are hard to find. Let's get it all together and start making masks." And now they've got enough material to actually start up their own industrial production facility, but only 3 people sewing or 1 sewing machine. That's terrible. And then they're not communicating that they have this, and they're not setting up means of distributing it. They're going, "Well, I paid for this. I'm not going to give it all away." And it's like, you are giving it away. Like, that's the whole point of this, is to give it away. They're producing PPE that is not up to an acceptable standard. They're using, say, material that's too sheer and doesn't catch all your droplets or things like that. Or like I said, the rubbery respirator masks that don't really work or don't create a proper seal. They're not answering the "what is the problem we're trying to solve" question. They're just doing like, "Hey, I can make a mask. Does it cover your face? It's a mask. I made 1,000 of them. Let's go." And that's not helpful. They're shooting first and asking questions later. They're just cranking out stuff and wasting time, wasting materials, and that's of course terrible. But eventually, stuff started to congeal. The better ideas eventually proved themselves, and of course, then to spread and prevail. Prusa and 3D Verkistan of 3D printing fame put out some really cool designs for the face shields that were used as little material as possible, and they made several versions. They kept improving, which was really cool. They used as little material as possible, and you could print them extremely fast, and you could print multiple per build plate. And then eventually someone figured out how you could actually stack them on top of each other, so you could print as many as your Z-axis could handle, and then you could quickly snap them apart. So you could then hit go once things seemed to be working okay, come back the next day, and pending your printer didn't think you said spaghetti, you could have 20 ready to go, versus having to check your printer every 15 minutes to swap it and put it and start it again. The NIH, our National Institute for Health, actually certified designs for use in medical facilities. They actually said, yes, this design is acceptable to be used in hospitals. And this is like from a rapid prototyping, like something someone is making in their home is now certified by the NIH to be used by medical professionals. And they had received so many designs. They had received so many designs for various things that they couldn't possibly clinically test them all. Like a clinical test, of course, takes weeks and weeks and months sometimes. But they would briefly go over them and go, this looks viable. And they now host a repo, and I have links to these at the end of the presentation. They host a repo of these designs where you can go download the 3D printer files and start printing, which is crazy to me. Because like, it's how cool is that? This government body that certifies healthcare everything is hosting its own 3D printing file repo. They've acknowledged 3D printers as a viable tool in fighting the pandemic. And then, of course, we have all those low-tech makes we talked about, where they're creating wearables that are super simple for anyone who's even just starting to learn how to sew to make. It's great practice. Like, you want to learn to sew, you want to get your hours in, nothing's going to make you better at sewing than making 1,000 masks, I assure you. And to help along with that, people who are good at not only sewing, but making patterns started producing these patterns and putting them in PDFs and sharing them, and making infographics on how to make various things and sharing them. And we all know the internet loves infographics because a picture is worth 1,000 words. Infographics are great. They're a great way of spreading information, be it true or false. And they're a great way of spreading instructions on how to do something. And that's what we had going on here. And that really, really helped out. What really took the 3D printing over the top was hackerspaces getting on board. Hackerspaces generally being places that have lots and lots, or at least industrial class 3D printers to dedicate to the situation. And even we had libraries that have 3D printer banks of 4, 8 printers. Even they were doing it. We had famous YouTubers like you may remember or have seen Linus Tech Tips bought a ton of 3D printers, and Micro Center, famous American computer retail chain Micro Center, donated tons of PETG. It's a type of polymer used in medical plastics to him and others to start cranking out these wearables as fast as possible. So you started having these, massive facilities that were buying up every last possible 3D printer and putting them together and putting them to work. And that kind of made it so the people like me who have one printer, weren't really needed for producing medical facility stuff anymore. And that's when we started to shift to things like ear savers or other stuff that we can crank out en masse versus the face shield parts that take us a very long time just to print one. Some manufacturers started selling pro-level PPE, or at least pro-level PPE materials at cost, which is really cool. Cost, including overhead, so they don't go out of business doing this, but making no profit on this stuff, which is exceptionally cool of them. And then even now, the community is continuing to tweak everything to make things faster and better to produce. Let's talk about where we're at right now. It seems like things are going well. It seems like things are getting better here in the US, but it's only because the media isn't looking in the right places. They're only looking to the places that have, PR people who talk to the press. We had, for a while, we had state and municipal entities sometimes. That's like city level entities purchasing PPE direct from China. Now, buying it from China is not necessarily bad in and of itself. Most of it came from China anyway. But we were getting price gouged on this stuff. We were getting charged way too much. And actually what ended up happening is that caused a new industry to spin up in China, where small business owners, small business entrepreneurs started making their own PPE and then spamming Americans to get us to buy PPE from them because, hey, we have it, nobody else does. And so if you check your spam inbox, you almost definitely have an email from some Chinese person offering to sell you these N95 masks that they started making. Once the states and the municipalities get this PPE, the distribution methodology is awful. Especially, here in Illinois, what they've been doing is distributing the PPE to hospitals based on what they think the need is, based off of last year's throughput numbers. So they go, hey, the hospitals that have the most patients will get the most of this PPE. And that's often the polar opposite of what actually needs to happen. Because of the way that COVID-19 operates, the vast majority of people who have severe symptoms from it live in low-income areas. And these low-income areas generally have lower populations. The hospitals don't see as much throughput because these people can't afford to go to the hospitals. But when they're dying from this, they do. But because these hospitals historically didn't need a ton of PPE, they're now not getting any of the PPE that they need more than anybody else. I mean, here in Chicago, 73% of deaths from COVID-19 are Black. And I mean Black, I don't mean, non-white. I don't mean, Latino and others. I mean, specifically just Black folks are dying more often than most of the other population. And that's because, the systemic racism that goes on, not only in Illinois, but in the US as a whole, leading to them not having a lifetime of lack of access to proper medical care and even just medical information that makes them the most susceptible to the disease. And now they get the most severe symptoms, which leads to them and because they generally live in these low income neighborhoods and are poverty stricken, they only go to the hospital once they're about to die, which means it's very hard to get them back from that brink. And so on top of that, these hospitals that are seeing record numbers, 10 times the number of patients that they're used to, are getting none of the PPE that they need. And in the meantime, on the other end of the city, we have, these hospitals in the rich white people land with too much. And they're just sitting on it because, the second wave, we might need it. We have too many people printing. Oh, let's talk about the hospitals turning away PPE. Yeah, we have a big problem here. I do a lot of distribution. I'm a driver for Get Me PPE Shy, the getmeppe.org organization. I pick up PPE from one place and I drive it to another. We have shuttlers. That's all I do. I do it on my motorcycle. It's a blast. I'll admit I love it because I get to get a ride in. But you'll have a problem where you'll take stuff to a hospital and walk into the front desk and they'll turn it away. They go, no, we can't take that. We can't take this. It's not NIH certified. It's not this or that, or we don't know, that we can't take this. And then you go around to the back door and to where the doctors are smoking. They do out in the back, and you go, hey, do you guys need PPE? Do you need this? And they go, oh my God, yes. And they'll take it right out of your trunk and take it in. You go, hey, the front desk said they can't take it. And they're like, yeah. So the deal is, we because we can't charge patients for this because we didn't buy it, the hospital leadership won't let us use it. Let me talk you through that again. Because the hospitals, and this is especially true for for-profit hospitals. By the way, we have for-profit hospitals in this country. And I don't mean I mean many hospitals who seek to make a profit. Because they can't, they didn't buy these things, they can't show where they bought them from, and there's no way for them to enter it into their inventory system, and thus they can't charge patients for it. And because they can't get money from the patients and or insurance companies for it, they turn it away. They won't even accept it. And that's the hospital leadership's decision. And that's a surprisingly common problem here. Don't dwell on that. It hurts. We have too many people still 3D printing and 3D printing the wrong stuff. We have not enough people sewing masks or doing anything else that medical facilities need. We have too many people caring about primary medical facilities. We have too many people caring about hospitals and things like that. Nobody's thinking about nursing homes. Nobody's thinking about halfway houses. Nobody's thinking about, abuse shelters, orphanages. Those are completely overlooked. Prisons. People are actively thinking about prisons, I think, and just going, the criminals. No, let them die in there. First off, that's a death sentence. That's not what they were sentenced to. Secondly, the U.S. famously has incarcerated, an insane number of innocent people. We've incarcerated more people per capita than any other country in the world. We have more prisoners per capita than any other country on Earth, and that's mainly because we incarcerate so many people for nonviolent crimes. If we just looked at marijuana-related incarcerations, it's insane. Go look on that on your own. That's a tangent I don't have time to get down through here today. But saying that someone deserves to die from what's effectively asphyxiation, one of those horrible ways you can die, because they got caught with enough weed on them for personal use, that's fucked up. And that's a real common attitude here. And then, of course, mainly because of the way that the media has been presenting it, the average person doesn't understand how the virus spreads. They don't know what the right way to protect themselves is. And that's because of just information overload. And a lot of us have turned off our ears to just listening to new information, which means we think the last information we took in is what's the truth. And of course, as this pandemic has gone on and we learn new information, that information gets presented immediately. And we're often told the information we thought was true before is now not true. And that now you go, well, what am I supposed to believe? And of course, you're supposed to believe what the new evidence shows, and until some other new evidence shows otherwise. And that's how fucking science has worked forever. But because we're so beaten over the heads with this information, even if it's factual, we tend to just tune it out. And that combined with the fact that the media talks about this pandemic in using like weather movement terms, like that it comes in waves, and that it's approaching the US, and that it is now moved into Chicago, versus what it is, small outbreaks that spread and that can keep spreading. We keep hearing the second wave term being used, like, oh, the second wave's coming in September. There'll be a second wave, like a storm or something. And so that leads people to think that, like, all right, once their numbers are on the downslope, it's gone, it's leaving, cool, we can finally calm down. And that's not the case, because it's outbreak driven. All you need is one person who goes out and gets sick and brings it back into their community to wreck everything all again. And we just saw that in Chicago. We just had to roll back freedoms in Chicago because the second we got them, everybody fucked it up. Here's how you can help, at least. We don't really need much 3D printing anymore. Don't buy a 3D printer. If you have one and you want to make some stuff and you can find someone who needs the things you can produce, please go ahead. But we're not desperate for 3D printers anymore. If you're in Chicago and you have PPE, you can hit up getmeppeshy.org or want to donate money. If you're just like, I have money, how can I throw money at this problem? That's my organization, and I'm happy to plug it, and please give us all your money. We so desperately need it. We're actually working on distilling sanitizers right now, but hospital grade. But if you're elsewhere and you still want to help, donate to just getmeppe.org in general. Feeding America is one of my favorites, and that's something nobody thinks about. Like, this pandemic has caused losses of jobs rampantly, a record high unemployment rate in the US, which means people can't eat, which means families can't eat, regardless of whether they've been sick or not. They can't buy food. And so, like, I feel like that's being overlooked with the whole PPE debacle, is we don't consider the other people who are suffering. And so a great way you can help that is by donating to Feeding America. I personally donate my time to Feeding America. I know the good they do, and I can personally attest that every single penny that goes in there is very effectively applied to the situation. If you want to help make stuff, check out the Mask for Docs Slack right there. Read the pinned posts. All the info is there, all the updated designs, all the recommendations, all the pro tips. Read the pinned post before you start asking questions. It's a great time to learn to sew, like I said. If you can't find anything to do in your community, you can't find anyone in your personal community doing things to help your community, that may be because nobody is, or nobody has taken the reins to start coordinate everything. And it might have to be you. Let it be you. Be that person. Get on Facebook, get on Reddit, get on the neighborhood apps, check your hacker spaces, get them involved. It have to be you. It might not be that there isn't a need. It might be that nobody's, taken that initiative. Let it be you. Do it up. So that's all I got time for today. I've been Johnny Christmas. You can find me at all of the places listed there. I'll have this slide deck along with, there's a lot of links and files to do all of this stuff in my GitHub. Just look for this talk in there. You could hit me up on Twitter. You could find me on Twitch, where I'm actually recording this talk ahead of time right now. So thanks to all my Twitch viewers. And thank you, Hope, for giving me my 20th year and letting me present here once again. This has been a blast. And hopefully I'll see you all in person in a couple of years.
Hi, we're back with Johnny Xmas. Johnny, thank you very much. It was a great talk about the COVID-19 and the U.S. maker response. So we're going to go right into some questions.
Sure. Yeah, thanks for having me. This is
All right.
my 10th Hope. This is exciting. Let's get to it.
It really is good. It's good to have you back. So the first question is, has anyone, what is the sanitizing process? How much does it cost and material to produce one mask?
So the sanitizing process, unfortunately, that varies greatly by who's bagging the stuff. In my home, when I am bagging things for distribution, I use aspirated hydrogen peroxide and or rubbing alcohol. What I'm doing here is printing, 3D printing. So I use PETG, which is a material that's able to withstand hospital grade disinfecting processes. But some people are not using such materials and they can't stand being, sat in rubbing alcohol for long periods of time, or they can't handle an autoclave. And so it varies based on that. Because we're dealing with people who are doing things in their own home, we have to rely on them to have thought of this precaution and read up on it. Some people may just assume, just wipe it down in alcohol and it's going to be fine. But like when you're dealing with 3D printing, it prints in these layers that create little ridges inside the plastics, and that those little ridges are massive gaps to bacteria that can just sit inside there. And so, COVID aside, you've got plenty of other things that could hang out in there as well. And so that's what I do. The aspirated hydrogen peroxide was something that the Department of Health had come up with, and it works really well, and that's cool. I hope everyone else is doing something similar, and we have to hope that the people on the receiving end also, when they unbag these things, they perform some kind of disinfecting process. And that's in the hospitals. Sure, I'm positive that's happening, but what about in places like nursing homes, spousal abuse shelters, orphanages, who can't even get their hands on a gallon of disinfectant? Like, what are they doing? Likely nothing. Soap and water, which far better than nothing. Soap and water is great. Definitely do it. And so that's right. What they're trying to do. As far as like, what does one mask cost? If we're talking about 3D printing the face shields, it's about 17 cents on my end, give or take. The cost of plastic has fluctuated greatly. 17 right. to 60 cents, somewhere in there. For a face mask, for a cloth mask, most people are making these out of old t-shirts and stuff, like free effectively. And that's a big thing I like to push, is like, we can stop this pandemic for free. Nobody has to buy a mask. So many people are giving masks away, and all we need is about that 83% mask adoption rate nationally. And the outbreaks would just cease to exist because we'd cut off the virus's ability to find new hosts to infect. And so this right. pandemic.
Thank you.
Yeah. Oh.
All right. Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Johnny. I appreciate it. We're out of time, but on behalf of all the Hope 2020 attendees, presenters, and volunteers, thank you very much, Johnny, for sharing your project about COVID-19 with us today.
Yeah, sorry I wasn't able to do more questions because my talk was so freaking long, but feel free to DM me in the usual cyberspace areas where you find me, and hopefully I can help you guys out. But thanks for having me. This is amazing.
You're very welcome, and you're welcome to hang out in the Matrix chat or the water cooler and continue your conversation with our attendees.
For sure.
All right, then. Thank you. At the top of the hour, our next talk, a Decepticon and Autobot walk into a bar, a new Python tool for enhanced OPSEC. That's coming up in just about 10 minutes. Fresh bumps and fresh tracks coming up right now. Take it away, ground control.
And
Hey everybody,
Hackers.
I'm
My name's
Kyle.
Fred.
I'm Emmanuel,
Some of you may
and we're
know
having
me,
a great time at
others
Hope.
might not.
We're wearing masks
I've
because
been,
we're
doing
outdoors,
artwork
but
for,
you don't have to wear a
Hackers
mask if you're
Untitled
indoors,
conferences
and you can
since-
enjoy Hope from wherever you happen to be, no matter how much traffic there is. We want to hear from you. Send us your bumps. Tell us where you are. Tell us what you're doing. Follow the directions on the bump button at hope.net. Have a good time and chat with your friends on Matrix. Best Hope ever.